Eric Malachite here with a storytelling rant that I'm sure many of you can relate to. And to jump right into the topic at hand, I just want to talk about why Hollywood, Netflix, and some novelists even write so many child characters, main characters, to be absolutely freaking insufferable. You know what I'm talking about. Characters who are just jerks for no reason, with no likable qualities whatsoever to contrast those hard edges, without an obvious character arc that would give us a reason to go on a journey with these characters, to experience or empathize with them, to understand why they are the way they are. Now, there are probably many examples that I could call forth. The War of the Worlds remake from the early 2000s, for example, those two characters are absolutely awful. The Star Wars prequels, also awful in different ways. Mike from later seasons of Stranger Things, absolutely awful, although surrounded by a lot of likable characters as well, so maybe not the best example. But I'm not going to use those specific examples. Instead, I want to look at a later example, a foreign series called Elves. It is a foreign Christmas horror series that is on Netflix. It's about 6 episodes, if I'm not mistaken, and there's a genuinely interesting premise behind it. We really wanted to love this. And the main reason why we couldn't get into it was Josephine. Josephine is insufferable. Absolutely insufferable. Couldn't get into her character whatsoever. So for those who don't know, Elves follows a family who is looking to get away from it all for the Christmas season, going to a secluded island, and they're going to camp out at this cabin and have a Merry Christmas, open their presents. All good, all great, right? Except as they are traveling to the cabin on this island, they're instructed to follow a certain road, but they don't. They deviate, they go through this forest, and they accidentally run something over, or so they think. The parents don't think anything of this, and they just think that, they hit a pothole or something. But Josephine doesn't think so. Josephine finds some black goo on the front of their family's SUV, and immediately thinks that this is, for some reason, an animal, that they hit an animal and it's probably hurting somewhere. A local guy, a caretaker of the area, and this large fence that seems to be blocking off a big portion of the forest beyond, tells them they're not supposed to be on this road. Probably should have been a sign that said that somewhere, right? And he tells them to move along their way to only take a certain road, the road that they were told to take in the first place, from now on. But Josephine can't let this go. She is thinking about this animal constantly, even though her parents are telling her that the animal is probably better off without her intervention. And long story short, the reason why there's this big old fence blocking part of the forest is because elves are real, and they are a carnivorous animal that is very dangerous. The whole island's culture is based around protecting themselves and living in harmony with nature and these elves. So, yeah, really cool premise. There are so many reasons why she should have stayed behind, not gone off on her own, but she decides for some arbitrary reason to go off and find this animal. Long story short, she gets a lot of people killed. There are many things that I can think of that would have fixed the problems in this show. Specifically, the motivations behind Josephine's actions, because she is contrarian to her parents for no reason. Though they do seem a little detached, they seem totally reasonable. But Josephine is just insufferable, always contradicting her mother and treating her family like crap. Really, they're a normal family and Josephine just seems like an asshole. I don't understand why writers think this is a good idea to write a character like this, especially a main character. You can have a foil that is sort of irredeemable, but child characters seem to be something that writers have a lot of trouble with. Here are a few things that I think the showrunners could have done to fix this issue with Josephine's character. Just give her some positive, likable characteristics to contrast her not so great, admittedly, decision making. Give her an arc. Does she learn something toward the end? We kept hoping that throughout the runtime of this show that Josephine would learn that perhaps this creature that she wanted to take care of and mother was better off with its own kind, perhaps. But really, she never does. She keeps going back for it over and over again, despite the fact that it keeps getting people killed. And by the end of the show, you're just rooting for her to die, and it never happens, and that's disappointing too. It's unfortunate, it really is, because there is some fantastic special effects in this show, some great shots, and there's so much potential here, but I feel like the showrunners wanted so desperately to have a bingeable TV show when really what they had was a story that would fit better in a film, a short hour-and-a-half film. That's all they needed. Instead, they stretch it out for 6 episodes, and it feels like everything is unearned by the end. Nobody's learned anything. By the end of the show, everyone's in the exact same spot where they were before. This is not good storytelling. Sure, flat characters can work really well. Dragon Ball, for example. Detective stories, mysteries. These are great genres for flat arcs, but where they don't really work is horror, in my opinion, at least. You can disagree with me all you want, but that's how I feel. Horror stories generally work best when they have a beginning, middle, and end. That's why a lot of horror sequels don't work. Aliens, for example, works because it's not primarily a horror story. The horror is already gone because the monster has been revealed. One of the reasons why Alien sequels have never been able to measure up to the horror in the original is because we already know what that monster is. We know its capabilities, we know its limits. So really, the big terror in Aliens is the fact that there are just so many of them. There are horror elements in Aliens, but it is not primarily a horror story. It's horror action. It's sci-fi horror action. And I guess I should probably mention other holiday films with insufferable child characters like Home Alone. Kevin is definitely insufferable. Although, I think those films get a big pass because they're funny and people love to laugh at the cartoonish violence. Kevin is not a great person. He's well written when he's around family, but as soon as he's alone, he's a diabolical genius with a murderous appetite for setting traps, which for some reason don't kill Harry and Marv. Harry and Marv totally make those films what they are. They're the reason why they're so funny. And while Macaulay Culkin is certainly not the worst child actor, it's really Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern that make them what they are. That's why I think all of the sequels after Macaulay left really didn't have the same feeling. They weren't funny because they didn't have Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern's comedic timing. But what we're talking about here is serious storytelling, or supposed to be serious storytelling. Home Alone doesn't take itself too seriously, so we're able to accept a lot more of these cartoonish and outlandish concepts than in Elves, where Josephine is supposed to be a serious character on a serious world. I totally just made a Batman Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth reference. You're welcome. This story needed to have a lesson, a moral. Some of the best horror stories are Twilight Zone-esque, where they have a really interesting through line, a character arc that takes our characters from a place where they start out, where they're maybe not the greatest person in the world, and takes them on a journey. And eventually, they realized by the end, maybe it's too late by that point, that they needed to learn a lesson. To get into a little bit of spoilers here, how would I fix this story as a whole? Well, first of all, there wasn't a whole lot of evidence in the original series to suggest that her dad had even hit an animal. There wasn't even a dent on the SUV. Just some black sludge, which could have been from a pothole or from, a patch of the street which had been recently paved or something like that. There was no reason to think that they had hit an animal. None whatsoever. So one of my first changes would be to make it blatantly obvious that there was in fact an animal that was injured and that her dad actually hit it. So a dent, blood of some sort. And I know the black stuff was supposed to be blood, but something. Anything, hair. These things had hair. Anything to indicate to Josephine that something was hurt and needed her attention. Make her a bleeding heart. That's a relatable character quality. But when the evidence isn't there, it just seems like she's just making it up to make it up. That she's being contrarian because she's a jerk. And when she blatantly goes off on her own and finds this thing and brings it back, not knowing what that's going to do to it, because, knowing anything about wild animals, once human contact is made, sometimes that animal can't go back into the wild because its parents will pick up the scent and probably kill it. That would have been the main thing to start. The second and most important thing would be to give her a character arc, an actual character arc. If she is naive enough to believe that she alone can save this thing, that she wants to adopt it, make it her baby, whatever, go for it. Give her a lesson that she has to learn throughout these horrifying events. Maybe she still causes all this trouble because of one act of kindness that she thought she was doing the right thing. Have her learn that lesson. There are a lot of things that could have worked in this series. And in fact, it makes it even more frustrating because so many movies write characters, child characters, to be so insufferable, yet they don't have that potential. They're just not that well made, or they're just all over the place. But this one had a lot of potential. If they had just spent a little more time on the writing, on the story crafting, on the themes, on the arcs, you would have had something really special. So writers out there, when you're writing a child character, make them relatable. Don't make them insufferable, please. But what do you think? Do you have other examples where children were written horribly as insufferable human beings in serious stories that you would like to share in the comments down below? Please do so. Let's start a conversation. I think that's it. Like and subscribe if you dug this content. More to come. All that good stuff. Eric Malachite out.